Hey there guys, this is Victor with Victor Vector JKU. Today I'm going to go over a quick tutorial on how to identify if your ball joints or your unit bearing are failing on you. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so over the past couple of months I've been noticing that my Jeep has been wandering inside the lanes while I've been driving down the highway. And this is leading me to believe that I have a similar issue to what I've ran into in the past, that potentially either my ball joints or could be potentially the unit bearing or wheel bearing is starting to go bad. So I'm going to show you guys a trick that my buddy Chris on Instagram, his handle is Prometheus_JKUR. He informed me of this technique and I've been able to use it, and it's been very beneficial for a quick diagnostic which requires minimal tools. So let me go ahead and walk you guys through that process. So essentially what we're going to need is we're going to need a device to be able to lift one tire off the ground at a time. And then we're going to need some sort of a rod or pry bar to be able to apply force to the bottom of the tire and try to create movement. So basically first step what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my floor jack, that's what I'm going to be using in this case. And I'm going to go ahead and lift up this tire to start with. Alright, so I have the tire lifted about 2 inches off the ground. That's all that I need to be able to perform this next step. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and grab what I'm using is basically a pry bar. That's what I'm going to use. You just need something that's sturdy and strong enough that won't deflect while you're applying torque between the ground and the tire. So what I'll do next is you're going to basically place it on the ground underneath the tire, and you're going to then lift up, and what you're looking for is to either hear a little bit of noise or see displacement in the tire. Now, I don't expect that you guys are going to be able to hear it from the distance that you are with the cameras, and you're not going to be able to visually see it, but I can identify that I do have a little bit of a rocking. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to reposition the camera for you guys to see exactly where you need to be looking to identify if it is a ball joint issue. And if you guys weren't aware, my good friends, Trail Coins, they do have magnetic koozies now available on their website. Go check them out. Okay, so what I want you guys to focus on while I'm moving the tire up and down with the pry bar is I want you to be looking in relation of the knuckle, so the orange piece in this case, to the inner C. You're going to be looking basically directly in line with the ball joints, top and bottom. And what you're going to be looking for is the knuckle moving in relation to the inner C. If you see any translation in and out, that means that your ball joints are getting worn out or potentially bad, and they need to either be replaced or rebuilt depending on what equipment you have on your vehicle. So let me go ahead and demonstrate here. Okay, now we moved over to the passenger side and we're going to look at the same area. Now this one's a little bit more difficult to get a clear picture on because the drag link mount is kind of blocking your straight on view, so I have to kind of angle the cameras a little bit differently. Hopefully you can still see similar locations. Keep an eye on the inner C in relation to the lower and upper knuckle. So in this video, it was pretty clear you could see the knuckle moving about the lower and upper mount. So that means that my passenger side ball joints need to be rebuilt. However, on the driver's side, it appeared that it was coming more from the wheel mounting surface than it was the knuckle. So what we need to do next is dismount the wheels. So one suggestion I have for you guys, if you're doing this by yourself, you don't have somebody to help you out with that can either apply the leverage to the tire with the pry bar, or can be looking from the front of the vehicle at your knuckles, it's nice to have your camera set up with a tripod or something so you can identify that, at least in the case if you're running an oversized tire. So for me, running my 37s, trying to lift up on a rod from here and peek over the tire to see the knuckle, it's a little bit too much of a reach for my arms, as well as basically the position I need to be in. So I was able to use my cameras to be able to identify where my issues were, and it appears that my driver's side is not the ball joints. But the passenger side, it is pretty apparent that it is the ball joints. So in this case, I know that I have something that's not quite right, both on the driver and passenger side. So next we need to go into and identify what is truly the issue. Confident on the passenger side, it is the knuckle. Driver's side, it could be a couple of things still. It could be that the unit bearing or wheel bearing is going out, or it could be that potentially I have some loose lug nuts, or could just be some other parts in there that are not bolted up tight. Could be something that's backed out and is loose. So basically I need to go through, pull the tire off on both sides, and continue my diagnostics. All right guys, so we got the wheel and tire off the Jeep now. I was able to, in the process, verify that my lug nuts were torque tight. Once I removed it, I put the wheel and tire underneath the frame rails of the Jeep, so just in case that the jack stands fail, that is a second layer of safety. Now, what I've also done is I've inspected all of the bolts that mount the unit bearing to the knuckle, as well as all the brake components, and all of them are still tight, nothing is backed out. So that leads me to then believe that most likely the unit bearing itself has failed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and disassemble the brake assembly off of the axle to be able to gain access to the wheel bearing. So basically what that's going to include is removing of the caliper and caliper mounting bracket, the rotor and wheel nut, which is connecting the axle shaft to the unit bearing. Once I get all those parts off, I should be able to have access to and identify if the unit bearing does have additional play than what it should, and I'll show you that once I have that wrapped up. Alright guys, so I got the unit bearing pulled off the driver's side of the axle, and what I was able to do was identify that this guy is starting to go out. Basically how I can identify this is by just spinning it. Notice how it's able to continue spinning after I have basically thrown it. It's very difficult to be able to tell if there's any in-out motion while it was still mounted on the Jeep with everything else removed, but basically by the lack of resistance there shows that this is going bad. If I take a new unit bearing, which I had purchased and have this as a spare part, you can see this one here, it has a lot more resistance, and I can't, no matter what I try to do, it's not going to just keep spinning. It has a lot more resistance, it's much more difficult to turn. So this one is in much better shape. So basically this is identifying that I do need to replace it, and I'll also do a similar check on the passenger side. One thing that I did also notice, when I was removing the nut for the unit bearing, which holds the axle shaft to the unit bearing, was that it was not still torqued to the correct loading. So the next time that I am doing my rotation of my tires, I'm going to be looking into this nut and verifying that it is still torqued per spec. So with this, I'm going to go and continue. I'm going to go ahead and throw the new unit bearing onto the driver's side. That should fix my issue. And then I'm going to be working on pulling apart the passenger side knuckle, accessing to the ball joints, and do the rebuild, and everything should be good to go, hopefully for this weekend, so I can get out and hit the trails. Alright guys, so I've got my knuckle off, and now we can go ahead and look at the condition of the ball joints. So first off, we'll go ahead and look at basically play. Notice how it wobbles pretty easily. I'm able to move this with just one finger with very little resistance. And similarly on the top, I can also move this one, again, pretty easy with very little resistance. Also, you might be able to see that the seal here for the upper has come loose, and also the lower one is starting to tear away from here as well. For the case of my Dynatrac rebuildable ball joints, it's definitely time to rebuild them. One, based on the play in the joint. Two, because both seals have failed. Now similarly, you could also see this in a normal press-in ball joint as well. You would see the play here or here. It should be nice and tight and should not have really much play, and it should be just like the unit bearing where you need to apply a significant amount of force to actually displace these. Alright guys, so I wrapped up the Dynatrac rebuildable ball joint kit. Everything is nice and tight again, and you can see that these require a lot more force and there's a lot less play in these now. And that's how your ball joint should be, either in the case of, say, the Dynatrac, or even just a factory style press-in ball joint. And then likewise, while I was going through on the passenger side, I looked at the unit bearing or wheel bearing, and I noticed that that also did have a little bit more play or a little bit more free spin than I had desired. So I also picked up a replacement for that, which I'm going to be installing, and that will get me basically a nice tight front end from the case of ball joints, unit bearings out. And I wanted to go through and do this because I have a trip to Moab a little bit later this year that I want to make sure that I'm prepared for, and making sure that my front end is nice and tight is going to be ideal for that long distance trip, taking my Jeep on the road. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up the video for today. I hope that this quick diagnostic video was of value for you guys and that you're able to use this to diagnose if you're having any issues with your Jeep tracking inside the lanes while your steering wheel is being held straight. If you found this video to be good content, please be sure to hit the like button. Drop any questions or comments in the video comments down below. If you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button to know about next upcoming videos that I have coming out. And for those of you that are returning subscribers, really appreciate you guys and continue to stick here with me. With that guys, we are Jeep JKU. We are taking on this build and the trails, both direction and magnitude. Alright, have a good one. Catch you next time.